CBS News airs an exclusive interview with Pope Francis covering everything from the ordination of women to same-sex blessings. But did they break any new ground? The Papal Posse's Robert Royal is here with analysis. A new documentary, Jesus Thirsts, is coming to theaters nationwide in June. It imparts the transformative power of the Blessed Sacrament. Producer Jim Wahlberg and director Tim Moriarty are here with details. And Chris Lewis, the son of a Hollywood legend, shares new details into his father's legacy and a new book, Jerry Lewis on Being a Person the World Over, begins right now.
Now, Raymond Arroyo.
A warm welcome to all of you joining us in the United States and the world over. If you'd like to comment on tonight's show, send me an X post. I'm at Raymond Arroyo. Lots to cover. Let's get to it. Pope Francis sat down with Norah O'Donnell of CBS News for an hour-long exclusive. She touched a range of topics and still managed to miss the mark. And the Vatican has issued a new directive on Marian apparitions. What does it say? Here with analysis is the editor-in-chief of thecatholicthing.org and one-third of the Papal Posse, Robert Royal. Bob, thank you for being here.
Great,
now, this was allegedly Pope Francis's first in-depth interview with the U.S. Broadcast Network. I guess they forgot about David Muir sitting down with the Pope in 2015 at the Vatican. I didn't. Anyway, Bob, O'Donnell asked the Pope about the ordination of women, specifically female deacons.
I'm curious, for a little girl growing up Catholic today, will she ever have the opportunity to be a deacon and participate as a clergy member in the church?
No.
I understand you have said no women as priests, but you are studying the idea of women as deacons. Is that something you're open to?
Si es diáconos con orden sagrado, no.
If it is deacons with holy orders, no. But women have always had, I would say, the function of deaconesses without being deacons, right?
La mujer tiene un gran servicio como mujer.
Women are of great service as women, not as ministers. As ministers in this regard within the holy orders.
Bob, your thoughts on what we heard there? I mean, he's deliberately and definitively shut down holy orders for women. But what about some other kind of non-ordained deaconesses here?
Yeah, look, this is a problem that we've seen many times in this papacy, that he says the right thing about the doctrine, about the disciplines, about the tradition of the church, and then in the next breath, he opens up a door, and then we wonder why people are confused about what's going on. He had this nun who talked about female deacons, deaconesses,
right,
who spoke to the group of cardinals who are his closest advisors, and she came out and said he wants to have deaconesses, but he just doesn't know about the form. And I think that what he's looking to is that women will serve in certain capacities, but the question down the line is going to be, are those capacities going to begin to tread on what we think of as what deacons do? And we know from the dynamic inside the church, that's where people are going to want it to head. And the ultimate goal is, of course, priesthood.
Well, look, this is the incrementalism we've been seeing all along. We've seen it in many, many other areas, including the one we're going to talk about in a moment. But once you say, well, Sarah, you're a deacon now, or a deaconess, you're only a breath away from the ceremony, and they're going to be demanding it, and then where's equality, and why are you discriminating against women? I mean, it opens up a whole can of worms. So I understand what he's saying here. I'm not sure. I think it may be a preview, actually, of the synod we're going to see. But stay tuned for that. Bob O'Donnell also asked Pope Francis about the idea of blessing same-sex couples. Watch.
Last year, you decided to allow Catholic priests to bless same-sex couples. That's a big change. Why?
No, what I allowed was not to bless the union. That cannot be done because that is not the sacrament. I cannot. The Lord made it that way. But to bless each person, yes. The blessing is for everyone. For everyone.
Bendecir una
To
unión
bless a homosexual
de
type
tipo
union,
homosexual
however, goes
va
against the
contra
given
el
right,
derecho,
against the
derecho
law of the
natural,
church.
derecho de la iglesia. Pero bendecir
But to
a
bless
cada
each person?
persona, ¿por qué no?
Why
La
not?
bendición es para
The blessing is
todos.
for all.
Algunos se escandalizaron.
Some people were
por eso.
scandalized by this, but
¿Por qué?
why? Everyone.
Todos,
Everyone.
todos.
Bob, the Pope corrected O'Donnell here on the notion and the nature of the blessing. But what is the difference, by all appearances? Nobody's scandalized by everyone getting a blessing. We had that all along. This document, we should say this, and Norah O'Donnell should have posed this to the Pope, and she didn't. Then why do you need a document saying couples can come forward, not individuals, couples to be blessed? I'll let you talk.
Yeah, well, you're assuming that this would be a really probing interview.
Or an interview at all.
When in fact, this is a series of basically softball questions, let's say it. And you know, God bless Norah O'Donnell. There's a certain deference toward the papacy, which it's good to see someone in the secular world at least doing that. But look, you know, when this sort of thing begins to happen, what we're obviously seeing is that there's an attempt for the Holy Father to kind of split the difference in a way that is not going to alienate the secular world. But I actually went back and I looked at Fiducia Supplicans, and I wish Father Murray was here because he's got chapter and verse. There are 9 different places where it talks about couples.
Yeah,
irregular
it doesn't
couples.
say
So
individual.
it doesn't just say individual. So you're exactly right. You can always bless individuals, 2, 3, 5, however many come in.
Yeah.
But there's clearly the attempt to kind of suggest something here, and maybe it'll continue down the line and end up somewhere else.
Everyone gets a blessing. It's called the end of Mass, but I'll leave it there. Pope Francis was also asked about sexual abuse cases in the church. This was interesting.
You have done more than anyone to try and reform the Catholic Church and repent for years of unspeakable sexual abuse against children by members of the clergy. But has the Church done enough?
It must continue to do more. Unfortunately, the tragedy of the abuses is enormous. And against this, an upright conscience. And not only to not permit it, but to put in place the conditions so that it does not happen. It cannot be tolerated. When there is a case of a religious man or woman who abuses, the full force of the law falls upon them. In this, there has been a great deal of progress.
Well, Bob, I was shocked that, again, O'Donnell offered no follow-up here. The follow-up should have been, and even a casual viewer would understand this, how can you say the full force of the law falls upon anyone guilty of this when you, Your Holiness, protected your friend, Bishop Zanchetta, and the disgraced Jesuit Marco Rupnik? Just this week, and I'm going to put it on the screen, the Vatican even used Rupnik's artwork on the website for a Marian feast day. Your thoughts, Bob?
Yeah, I'm glad that he said this. I wish that we had a follow through on it, but it seems that clericalism that he constantly denounces is at work when it comes to people who are close to him or at least are high up in the church hierarchy in one way or another. And yes, look, we have to. I'm absolutely convinced that CBS is a serious enough news organization that it must know about the Rupnik case, because that is notorious. We're talking about women who were abused in the confessional, in Mass, through blasphemies, through utterly terrible things. Yeah. And if we're talking about protecting women and protecting young people and whatnot, that must be something that a news organization knows about. So they chose not to go ahead and pursue that. So what can we say about this? He's talking the good game. He's not walking the talk.
Pope Benedict laicized something like 3,000 priests as CDF, and then at the CDF, and then as Pope. If he had been guilty of this sort of thing, where a personal spiritual son had been protected by him while they were and protected from the process, the canonical process, which Zanchetta has been protected from, to say nothing of this Rupnik character, I promise you CBS and every other news operation would have correctly brought that up if they'd been given the opportunity to sit in his face. This is a dereliction of duty. Again, I've said this again and again. It's a dereliction of duty on the part of the media when we don't hold these people accountable when we have the opportunity to do so. The Pope was also asked about Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton's efforts to shut down Annunciation House, a large migrant shelter on the U.S.-Mexico border. Now, the Texas AG alleges that the facility encourages migrants to enter the U.S. illegally. Here's the question.
The state of Texas is attempting to shut down a Catholic charity on the border with Mexico that offers undocumented migrants humanitarian assistance. What do you think of that?
That is madness, sheer madness. To close the border and leave them there, that is madness. The migrant has to be received. Thereafter, you see how you're going to deal with them. Maybe you have to send him back. I don't know. But each case ought to be considered humanely.
Bob, your reaction. And do states and federal governments not have a right to enforce their borders?
Yeah, I'm sure it's not only that Catholic institution that is encouraging people to come. And that's the dimension that I think he misses about this immigration question. He's always just taking it as if it's a snapshot of individual people that are going to be received, when in fact, this is a much broader problem. Pope Benedict talked about the right not to have to emigrate, that people ought to have countries that they can remain in. I remember during the Synod on Youth, they were talking even during the Synod itself about the devastation it has on the countries that their most talented citizens leave from.
Yeah.
So it's a much bigger problem than he's trying to portray there. And look, you don't want to encourage people to break the law. I think, look, we have so many people landing on the border. We have to do something about them. But is it okay for them to be let into the country, breaking the law as they come into the country? Is it good for the country itself? If you think that you need to do some moral reasoning about these situations, it's got to be more than just anybody who shows up is welcome to come in and then we'll sort it out later.
And this is also journalistically irregular, because what isn't mentioned here is these aren't people seeking protection from where they live. These aren't families coming. I just saw the report earlier today at the San Diego crossing. Pakistanis, Iranians, Chinese nationals. These are not refugees. These are people coming for a different purpose. We have to figure out what it is, and we need to stop it at the border to just say, who are you? Why are you coming? That's what the country is obligated to do by law. Of course, O'Donnell asked Pope Francis about his conservative critics, particularly those in the big old bad USA.
There are conservative bishops in the United States that oppose your new efforts to revisit teachings and traditions. How do you address their criticism?
You used an adjective, conservative. That is, conservative is one who clings to something and does not want to see beyond that. It is a suicidal attitude. Because one thing is to take tradition into account, to consider situations from the past, but quite another is to be closed up inside a dogmatic box.
Bob, people locked in those dogmatic boxes. What do you make of this comment?
Well, I make it that you and I are probably fairly conservative fellows. You probably would apply that label to us.
I'm not in any box, baby. I don't know where you are.
Look, the whole question of conservatism and liberalism doesn't really apply in the church the way it does in politics. But that said, everybody is both a conservative and a liberal. I mean, you conserve not just in some sort of psychologically damaged way, you're clamped down on something. It's like Obama talking about people clinging to guns and religion. Remember that famous remark? We're talking about holding on to those permanent truths, those eternal truths that have been conveyed to us by God. Naturally, of course, we all also deal with the situations that we're in. I think it's kind of slanderous, actually, for the Holy Father to say, and I'm sorry to have to say this, but I think it's just true, that to think of conservatives as somehow people who are psychologically unwilling to live in the world. That's not any. There are obviously people who are liberal and conservative who have psychological problems.
Yeah.
But that's not really the general run of conservatives that I'm familiar with.
You know what the right answer is, and the one he should have offered was, let me stop you. We don't consider conservative liberal boxes when talking about the eternal deposit of faith of Jesus Christ. It is eternal. It is both liberal, conservative, and everything in between. It's the alpha and the omega. That's who we are. So I reject those political titles, Nora. Let's move on. That's where you start. But to double down on them, you really are, you're placing, dare I say it, your critics and your friends in your own dogmatic box. That is, I think, to confirm the media narrative. That's never a good thing. But perhaps running counter to this here, I'm not even going to talk about, let's put the philosophical analysis aside, but running counter to the Pope's assessment, or Nora O'Donnell's, a recent study of young priests in Germany reveals that they don't seem to have much of a stomach for the progressive German synodal way. About 75% of new priests in Germany oppose women's ordination. About 70% support priestly celibacy. The study was organized by the German Bishops' Conference and the Bochum Center for Applied Pastoral Research, and it surveyed priests ordained between 2010 and 2021. Bob, this poll and the organizers are chalking this up to these young men being out of touch with modern society and lacking creativity. What do you see here?
Well, there are many ways in which it's good to be out of touch with modern society. It's not as if we have to swallow everything that's going on out there in the world. And look, along with the surveys that we've had of younger priests in the United States as well, if you're in Rome and looking at who are my best guys, who are my...
Where's the future?
Yeah, where's the future? Where are my shock troops? Who are the guys who are going to go out and evangelize? You've got the United States, which has a very dynamic Catholic Church, in spite of all the problems that we have. You have Germany, which is in utter turmoil, and yet the people who are actually being ordained, I don't think that they're going to get a large crop of ordinations if they become liberal the way that the German synodal way would like to go. So you're either facing a suicide of the church. I mean, he's talked about conservatism as suicide.
We have an exclusive interview with the Pope to share with you. This was recorded late last year. It's only being shown now for the first time on television. This is the Pope being interviewed by Italian journalist Alessandro Iovino and Protestant pastor Giovanni Trattino, an ecumenical evangelical leader. Now, as a way to set this up, I want to refer back to Nora O'Donnell, who said of the Pope's choice of dwelling at the Casa Santa Marta, the guest house built in the 90s, it's not what Francis wears, but where he lives. That set the tone of the papacy 11 years ago. Instead of a palace above St. Peter's Square in Vatican City, the Pope chose to live in the Vatican guest house, Casa Santa Marta, Ms. O'Donnell said. Alessandro Iovino asked Pope Francis why he lives at the Vatican's guest house. Listen to the answer. Pope Francis, you have stated that you chose to live here in Casa Santa Marta because you want to be surrounded by friends. What does this mean? And how much has the friendship with Pastor Giovanni influenced you? And Pope Francis says, I cannot imagine what life would be like without friends. Friendship is a gift from the Lord. It is a gift that always makes both parties grow, and the friend seeks to help the other friend grow often, giving them precedence because friendship is so kind and deep. It makes peace. For me, this is the most beautiful thing about friends, peace. On the other hand, enmity leads to wars. Now, Bob, we've been talking about this Casa Santa Marta versus the Apostolic Palace for 11 years. I think it's a tired old media creation. Your comments and tie in what the Pope says here and the depiction of CBS News on his living arrangement.
Yeah, I mean, he even said further that psychologically he just needs to be around people, and he felt that if he was up in the Apostolic Palace, I mean, you and I have both been in there, and it's a very modest. From the outside, it's very big.
Yeah, beautiful.
But inside, it's a very
the
modest.
papal apartment. I mean, we have to say, John Paul and Benedict. I saw it with my own eyes. They slept in little single beds. Tiny little beds in this drafty old palace built in the 16th century. I mean, if it were up to me, Bob, I'd stay in the new, 1990s Hilton too.
No, but you're right. There's a way in which sort of this media concoction of, he's there, and it's humble because he's there. And look, he is in many ways a humble man. He's also a very self-assertive man in a lot of ways as well. But they want to do that. They want to kind of continue this media narrative that he's opened up the church to gays and to trans people and more women, and so it makes him look like he's a progressive, even though when he actually gets down to talking about specific principles, he'll still repeat those Catholic arguments. And no pope before him, for example, has ever said that getting an abortion is hiring a hitman. That is never highlighted in the Norah O'Donnell world.
Right. They didn't mention that line. In fact, that's a good segue. This being an ecumenical interview, Iovino asked Pope Francis about life, about abortion. Something that, to his credit, Pope Francis has always taught quite clearly. Iovino asks, is there life? Is there life? And Pope Francis says, from the moment of conception. And Iovino says, on this one must be clear. And he says, clear, there is life. If you terminate it, you take a life away. There is no qualification. Clear words, Pastor Giovanni. And Pastor Giovanni says, absolutely, yes. I was struck by the clarity of the Pope here. And I have to say, it's kind of refreshing to hear him so bluntly say these eternal truths.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not only about abortion. I mean, who else has really spoken out so repeatedly, even when he didn't absolutely have to, about gender ideology as being the kind of new form of colonialism and imperialism? I think that's very good rhetoric, because it takes that kind of progressive language about, well, we don't want to colonize other people's cultures, and it turns it against this progressivism that's really absolutely run wild in the United States and is beginning to run wild in Europe and elsewhere as well.
But then I think you see the confusion in the minds of the public, because they hear that teaching, but then they see, a group of trans people coming in and being blessed by the Pope and having letters written to them. So it's confusing to them. And it's not about excluding anybody, but it's the mixed messaging of what you're saying and what you're doing. It would be like me, saying, oh, look, I love my kids, and then I go to dinner alone and don't invite anybody. I mean, it doesn't matter what you say. What is he doing? Yeah. And I do think that begs a larger question. New Vatican directives on Marian apparitions were released last week. This got very little coverage, I'm amazed, in the wider world. The document, entitled Norms for Proceeding in the Discernment of Alleged Supernatural Phenomena, replaces the procedures put in place by Pope Paul VI in 1978. Now that it's been released, your thoughts on these new directives, and then we'll get into
it. Yeah, and we predicted a little while ago that this probably would be centralizing more power in Rome about what to do about these apparitions. And partly it's because in the new media environment, these things tend to run wild, and there are always a lot of religious hucksters in the world. And we certainly want to make sure that if we're going to tell people, look, that's a pilgrimage site, you can go there and have some spiritual benefit from it, we want to make sure that what they're getting when they're there is real Catholicism. So, look, it goes against the basic premise of Francis's papacy, that he wants to decentralize.
Right.
But there are very clearly things about Catholicism that require Rome to be involved and maybe to make a decision even against some local.
Well, I mean, the most significant change here in these new norms is that it doesn't leave it to the local bishop any longer. Rome is deciding, or proving at least, the authenticity of these supernatural events. Is that a good thing?
Well, I mean, we hear, because we didn't know about this in the past, we hear that there used to be these back-channel conversations with the bishops, and no doubt bishops wanted to make sure that Rome was okay with decisions that they're going to be making. Clearly, the main issue that's now going to come to the fore is what to do about Medjugorje.
Right.
And we don't know what way that is going to fall out. It's been back and forth over the years with different popes, and presumably they're going to have to issue some kind of decision relatively soon.
And I wasn't going to talk about this, but Cardinal Fernandez did at the press conference bring up Medjugorje. I'll put on the screen what he said. He said, regarding Medjugorje, we'll see. For example, I haven't read the material available at the dicastery. I know these details, but we need to study to reach a conclusion with these new norms. Keep in mind that a phenomenon can be considered good, not dangerous at the origin, but it may have some issues as its later development. Therefore, sometimes a declaration needs to clarify these different stages. That's a distinction we need to consider. And then suppose there was a green light, a Neil Albstadt, we might also need to clarify that some details should not be taken seriously. If I remember correctly, the Madonna there was giving orders, setting the schedule, the place, what the bishop should do, etc. That needs to be clarified, Fernandez said. This sounds like a pullback on Medjugorje.
Yeah. My one worry about this is that this papacy has shown itself to be very careless with texts. So it says things. I mean, Fiducia Supplicans already created a disaster because of the confusions within the document itself, and the attempts at clarification and the attempts to calm things down. All that should have been done ahead of time.
Right.
And there are other documents that they've issued that had to be clarified within a few days because people pointed to problems that are there. So I hope they proceed very carefully with this. I don't have a lot of confidence in it because of their track record, but there's a reason why we have lawyers, canon lawyers, we have people who know doctrine, because when the church speaks, we want it to speak accurately, to convey the right messages. If you say one thing and do another, as we've been saying, you don't know what has been said or what's been communicated.
Bob, maybe there's a Serbian carve-out in the offing like the African bishops got from the same-sex blessings. Right. If the bishops, grouse as a group, maybe they get a particular carve-out. Medjugorje will be just fine. The U.S. Church is spending, and this is a shocking figure, $50 million on this National Eucharistic Congress in Indiana in July. Various pilgrimages, processions have started all over the country, which is a beautiful thing. But meanwhile, in France, there is an organic Eucharistic revival underway. For nearly 1,000 years, pilgrims have been walking from Paris to Chartres in order to venerate one of the most sacred relics in all of Christendom, the Veil of Our Lady, kept at Chartres Cathedral. Now, the Chartres pilgrimage is a 3-day, 60-mile walk that takes place each year to commemorate the Feast of Pentecost, or they end on the Feast of Pentecost. This past week, to conclude the pilgrimage, 20,000 Catholics attended a traditional Latin Mass at the cathedral, celebrated by Cardinal Gerhard Müller. Bob, what's most significant in your mind about this pilgrimage? I mean, aside from the large number of people, and I'll bet it didn't cost them anywhere near $50 million.
Look, I've been wanting to do this,
me too.
this pilgrimage, but they get so-called sold out. I mean, they had 18,000 people who were registered. That was the absolute maximum. They have to control it, through the streets from Paris to Chartres. And a lot of these people on pilgrimage were young people.
Yeah, it's all kids.
It seems to be that there's, as we've said before about Latin masses and some of the traditions, people are looking for something in this chaos of postmodernity. And they see something like this that's been going on for hundreds and maybe 1,000 years, and it's beautiful, and they get out and they're together with other people, and it's got a. I was talking with a priest the other day who just went through the American pilgrimage. The Eucharistic procession came through his parish, and he said, other than his ordination, it was one of the most beautiful experiences he's ever had in the church. Yeah. So, look, these things energize people. They do. We never know where these seeds are going to fall and what kind of fruit they're going to produce. It's absolutely wonderful, and it happens in a lot of places. I run a program in the Slovak Republic every year. We have to be careful the way we time it when we get out to the eastern part of Slovakia, because there's a Marian pilgrimage to this hillside shrine that attracts 100,000 people every July. You've never heard of it. It's in Levocha. And they're not the only ones.
It's incredible. And I think young people, over the weekend, somebody sent me pictures of the Chartres pilgrimage. They were actually on it. And they said, it's amazing. People are telling us, we're returning to the past. I said, no, you're rushing to the eternal. That's really what this is. This is a rush to the eternal. It's what young people instinctively have in them. They want to be part of something countercultural and something that roots them to a lasting root, to something that lasts and perdures. And I think that's what this Chartres pilgrimage is. But a snapshot of, and the Latin Mass perhaps a larger piece of this same movement. So no matter what people say, what they do, I guess we're tying this up nicely, Bob, what people do is ultimately, I think, far more important. And we're seeing beautiful actions from the faithful and particularly young Catholics. Robert Royal, we will leave it there. For more commentary by Bob and Father Gerald Murray of happy memory, visit thecatholicthing.org. He'll be back. He's fine. He's fine. He was traveling this week, or we would have had him here. The documentary Jesus Thirst, The Miracle of the Eucharist, will arrive in theaters in early June. In the midst of a Eucharistic revival here in the U.S., this new film is a special release date, June 4th, 5th, and 6th, only in cinemas across the country from Fathom Events. Jesus Thirst takes viewers on a global journey to rediscover the transformative power of the Blessed Sacrament. But what was the inspiration behind the film, and why is it now the perfect time for its release? Here to tell us, I'm joined in studio by the producer, my pal Jim Wahlberg, and writer-director Tim Moriarty. Thank you both for being here, gents. Jim, I want to start with you because I know this is a passion project for you. You grew up in a Catholic family of 9 in Boston. At an early age, you personally, and you've told this story before, became addicted to drugs. You were involved in crime in school. While serving a second prison sentence, you're visited by a saint.
Amen.
Tell me about that encounter and how you think she led you to this project.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was in prison doing my second state prison sentence, and I was doing a 6 to 9 years. And I just knew I couldn't do 9 years. So I started creating the illusion that I was trying to become rehabilitated. And I was just running game, you know? And apparently the only one that was going for it was the Catholic priest. And he was a great man. He was a holy man. And I know that he's in heaven today. Father James Freitas approached me and said to me, you know, I hear good things. I hear you're trying to change your life. I have a job opportunity for you. Would you be interested? And my first thought is, how am I going to work this situation to my benefit? Not, can I get to the foot of the cross? Because I think there's a misconception. You said, you know, we're this Catholic family, right?
Yeah.
But growing up in Boston, we were more culturally Catholic than anything else. I made my first Holy Communion because it's what you did.
Right.
But nobody taught me that Jesus loved me. Nobody taught me that Jesus died for me. I grew up with, God's going to get you for that. You know, he knows everything. And if he knows everything, then I'm in a lot of trouble. And so I was robbed of that loving relationship, you know. And so I'm in prison again for the second time. And I grew up in prison. I was juvenile detention.
When did you go in?
I went in 83.
And you were how old?
I was 18 years old, but I had already done from 12 to 18 in juvenile detention.
Okay.
So you know, it was the entire 80s basically, and so I take the job. I'm working in the chapel. And I don't see the hustle. I'm asking him for stuff, and he's like, listen, I need you to clean the chapel before the vigil mass on Saturday, and now I'm in mass, right? And so not long after taking the job, he comes to me excited and says, Mother Teresa's coming to this prison. And I said, that's incredible, Father. Who's Mother Teresa, right? Because
Whose mother is she?
I had no idea. I probably didn't know who the president was either. I was really damaged. And so ultimately the day came.
Wow.
And the day came, and I witnessed true humility for the first time in my life. I was also part of the procession, which I didn't know what that was either, and because I worked in the chapel. And so we process in, and the cardinal goes up on the stage, and he's beckoning Mother to come up to her special spot, her special chair. And no. And she backs out, and she kneels on the floor with the inmates. And it was very confusing to me because, you know, here's this event, right? And it's all for her, which I don't know. I don't understand, right?
Yeah.
It was never about her.
Right.
It was always about Jesus. But because she was the special guest, and all these, you know, the warden, the governor, everybody was there.
Right.
So they were all there to see her, and I couldn't understand why she wanted to be with us. And so when her time came to speak, and she said the words that she said, it changed everything. In that moment, I was just confused. I went back to my cell. I didn't sleep. The next morning, when that door opened, I ran to the chapel, to Father Freitas, and I said, Father, I need to know more about this Jesus that loves me. this Jesus that died for me, not what I was raised with. And, you know, the memory's a funny thing. And the way I remember it, he kind of chuckled and, right? He checked it off and he was like, and instantly he started to catechize me. He started to teach me the faith, and he didn't pull down the catechism from the shelf and blow the dust off. He just lovingly taught me our faith. And it changed everything for me. He started to prepare me to make my confirmation, which I did in prison, but I was transferred from the prison I was in, MCI Concord, to another prison, and I went to tell Father I was being transferred. And he said, have a seat. And he picked up the phone and he called the priest in the next prison. And he said, special delivery FedEx package. This is where we are in the process. And so I got transferred twice, made it to minimum security, and it was time for me to make my confirmation. And turns out that that day becomes the most important day in my life, not just because I'm confirmed into my faith and into my church, but it also becomes the most important day of my life as it relates to my mom and our relationship. She would refer back to that day for the rest of her life as the day she knew that her son was going to be okay. Yeah, it was a beautiful moment.
I'll say.
Yeah.
And it really led you to this project. And
Absolutely.
Tim, you wrote and directed this project, Jesus Thirst. You traveled around the world. I mean, you've captured scenes, the United States, Poland, Italy, Bosnia, Canada, Slovenia. Tell us about making this movie, and how did you connect with Jim to collaborate on the film in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. We met during the filming of Mother Teresa, No Greater Love, which was produced for the Knights of Columbus.
Beautiful film, yeah.
And we struck up a good friendship in a sense of the importance of telling Catholic stories in a way where the production value is very, very high, and we're really trying to bring a spirit of evangelization through art, through filmmaking. This project came about out of the Diocese of Orange. Deacon Steve Greco, who is the executive producer of the project, he had a relationship with Jim, and Jim said, hey, you know, I think there's a film here about the Eucharist. I think that this is a time right now in the church in America where people have lost faith in the Eucharist. The church has been hurting. This is a way to revive faith in the Eucharist, to bring about that new evangelization that we've been talking about for decades now. So in trying to think through, how do you tell a film about the Eucharist? How do you, as you know, how do you create a dramatic arc? Yeah. You can't just have a series of vignettes. It needs to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So we thought about it, and we saw in the road to Emmaus, Jesus really shows us what the dramatic arc is. You have people, you have these disciples, they're leaving Jerusalem, they are dejected, they're depressed, they're hopeless. What does Jesus do? He goes back into the Scriptures, and he unlocks the Scriptures for them. Their hearts start to, fire starts to grow in them. They start to feel ablaze again, and then Jesus breaks the bread, their eyes are open. So this film, we said, you know what, we need to open people's eyes. We need to bring that vision back in a world that's grown totally numb and small with this kind of materialistic worldview. So we said, okay, we're going to go into the Scriptures. We're also going to tell stories about individuals who have been transformed by the Eucharist. We're going to go around the world, tell stories of Cardinal Vantuan, who was imprisoned by the communists for 13 years, and for 9 of those years, solitary confinement. And his family smuggles in bread and wine, and he says Mass in solitary confinement.
In his hand.
In his hand.
I interviewed him. Yeah.
Did you really?
Yeah, in his hand. He used to consecrate in the Eucharist, and then eventually converts his captors.
That's
an amazing
right.
story.
It's incredible. Fulton Sheen is very, very present in this film, and his hour of power, in the sense of where he got his strength. He opens the film, he closes the film. So for us, it was, we need to tell the universal story here. We need to go around the world. We need to open up the Scriptures, and we do it in a way that's trying to bring that Catholic sacramental vision back.
I want to give folks a taste of the film and get your reaction to this. This is a clip of Dr. Scott Hahn talking about the Eucharist. Watch.
Take this, all of you, and eat of it. This is my body. And then near the end of the liturgy, he takes the chalice, and again, he says words that we've heard all of our lives. They never heard it before. This is the cup of my blood, the blood of the new covenant poured out for you and for many for the forgiveness of sins. This is where the sacrifice of the new covenant Passover was initiated. And so Good Friday is precisely where that same sacrifice is consummated.
Jim, tell me about this approach, and are Eucharistic miracles part of this film?
Yeah, so it's funny that the clip we're showing is Dr. Scott Hahn. So I was chasing Dr. Scott Hahn around, trying to get him nailed down to be in this film. I knew that I wanted him in this film. And so I had called him a few times and didn't hear back. And then I get a call. It's Sunday afternoon, and I'm in the park with my family. And I'm not allowed to be on the phone on Sunday afternoon, I can tell you. And so I look down, and I see his name light up on my phone. I'm like, oh, I got to take this. So I'm hiding behind a tree. And he says, oh, Dr. Scott Hahn here. And he says, tell me about your film. And I go right to Eucharistic miracles, right? I'm like, we got to prove to people that this is Jesus. This is real human flesh. This is the flesh of a heart. We have to prove this to them, right? And he goes, He said, instead of spending so much time on Eucharistic miracles, he said, maybe we could spend more time on the miracle of the Eucharist. And I said, oh, Dr. Hahn, I need you to say it just that way. Will you commit to me now, today? And he said, I'm in. Wow. You know, and he's absolutely fantastic. And we have some of the smartest, most educated people in this film about our faith, right? So we got to learn so much in the process. It's beautiful.
Yeah. The Catholic Church is in crisis. You both have referenced this. Only 1 in 4 Catholics attend weekly Mass, and nearly 70% believe the Eucharist is only a symbol. Tim, how does this film counter some of that, or awaken people to what has been a ghost in their life all along?
Well, I think, Fulton Sheen in 1974 said Christendom is gone. Christendom is dead. And what does that mean? It means the cultural fabric which made belief in the Eucharist, which made belief in our faith somewhat easier, that is gone. It's very difficult now, given all that we are up against, this materialistic worldview, secularism, a complete culture that's untethered from any sense of absolute value. So how do we reach those people? How do we reach Catholics who are really infected by those ideas? For us, I think the role of Catholic art is unbelievably powerful. It's what Catholics have been doing, from the first days, with icons, with medieval cathedrals. So this film is a way, it's a presentation of the Catholic worldview, a vision, not just engaging the head. It's important. Catechesis is very important, but engaging the heart and also engaging the senses. So this is our attempt to say, we need to invite people back, and we need to present a vision. Without a vision, the people perish. We need to present a vision, and that's what this film is an attempt to do.
And Jim, tell me about the cast, if I can use that term, that you've collected here. And what do you want people to do? Obviously, you want them to come out to these Fathom events at the top of June. Who do you want them to bring along?
Yeah, we want them to bring up those skeptics, right? So we know that the people who believe are watching, right? We know that they're watching, they're participating in their faith, right? This is where they get their information, right? Because it's the most important thing in their life, right? So we want them to bring their fallen away children and their, let's go to the movies. I'll buy you popcorn. You don't have to do anything. Just come and sit, right? And for me, I think it's critical that people go in groups and that there's a conversation being had. Right? And we've been blessed because Fathom gave us 2 screens per day. So we're 4 p.m. in the afternoon. So our kids coming from school and our seniors who don't want to be out at night, they don't feel safe, right? And then there's a 7 p.m. screening as well. So, and it's on over 1,000 screens.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, this is a major, major release.
Yeah, and tell me about the cast you've assembled and why these people.
So, I'll give you some of the names and you'll know right away, right? So we have Father Don Calloway, Father Chris Alar, Father Spitzer, right? I mean, this guy's a genius, right?
Great.
Dr. Scott Hahn.
Dr. Tim Gray, the Augustine Institute.
Sure.
Curtis Martin.
Martin.
CEO Focus.
Christophonic.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So these are people that they're on the front lines. They're on the firing lines of life.
Right, Tim, I can see you want to add something.
Patrick Kelly, the Knights of Columbus. The Knights have a special bonus feature at the end of the film as well about Our Lady of Guadalupe, Woman of the Eucharist.
Oh, okay.
So that's another feature
Yeah.
for this as well.
I thought you were going to give me an insurance rebate. I'm always hoping. Thank you,
We'll see what
gents.
we can do.
Okay, yeah. Patrick has to get working on that for me. Jesus Thirsts, The Miracle of the Eucharist, produced by Jim Wahlberg, directed by Tim Moriarty, hits select theaters nationwide on June 4th, 5th, and 6th from Fathom Events. Visit JesusThirstFilm.com. JesusThirstFilm.com for more information, tickets, bring your groups, go to the theater. It will transform your life, as the Eucharist will as well. Thank you, gents. He grew up among Hollywood royalty as the son of late and legendary comic, actor-director Jerry Lewis. He worked with his dad on every muscular dystrophy telethon for nearly 40 years, and beginning in the year 2000, he followed a charitable vocation of his own, bringing the gift of mobility to the disabled as president of the American Wheelchair Mission. He's here tonight to talk about his charity work and a brand new book he's written about his dad. It's called Jerry Lewis on Being a Person. Please welcome back to the program my pal Chris Lewis. Chris,
Thank you, Raymond.
Thank you for coming. I saw this in its early iteration, and I loved this book for so many reasons. My question is, tell us about, this is kind of the framework you're using here is based on a book that your father wrote at one point, a very small book by his own admission, called On Being a Person. How did that book come to be, and why did you use that as the rubric for this work?
Well, during the filming of his film, The Nutty Professor, in 1962, he kind of felt there was some tension between the crew, like they weren't getting along real well in the first week. So he went home that night and he wrote on his typewriter 45 different things that you should do to be a better person, like love God, pray, buy a dog, give candy to children, things like that.
Tell the truth.
Just, stuff. Say good morning to anybody. And what I did is I realized that I was following many of the things I learned in his book through my life. And so then I started investigating, well, why were those things important to him? And I believe I have created a framework to be able to explain how he became such an incredibly successful entertainer, comedian, writer, director, and one of the most impactful humanitarians in history.
Yet look, there have been volumes written about your father, thousands of articles and interviews. I mean, I read a lot of them before the interviews we did. Yet you say here that he's misunderstood. What about him is misunderstood?
Well, people took him as being either overconfident or an egomaniac, but he was a perfectionist. That's all he wanted. He wanted everybody to put in as much as he did into being the best person he could possibly be for everyone.
But I'm going to jump ahead because there's a line in the book that you found, I guess, written out, and I don't know if this was in a diary or something that was just top of mind that he felt he had to get out. But I'm going to put it on the screen. He says, "The pain of perfection is a constant reminder that what we do is more than just a whim or a normal gesture. What we do is meant to represent so much that we have to be imprisoned by our own government and pay attention to the rules and regulations set down by that government. A government that functions from within and one that we are not able to confer with or reason with or doubt or deny. For us to lose the pain, we would have to give up our very existence and hurry back to the masses and be one of the many. One of those timid souls that really don't care or believe that ecstasy is even attainable. How sad that would be, and what pain of sadness. And that pain of sadness is probably far greater than the pain of perfection." Why does that capture who he is, and where did you find that?
I actually found that in many of the documents that he gave to me. He would write these things out just for himself. It wasn't meant to go to anybody. It was just for himself because he was feeling the pain of perfection. In the late 60s when he wrote this, it was a very frustrating time in the movie business, and he was not able to be as creative as he wanted to be. He didn't have the latitude he had before, and it was a very frustrating time for him.
I mean, we have to say, your father was a remarkable artist in so many ways, an innovator. I mean, I remember reading here, he talks about having Cinderfella, one of his famous films, that was already in the can. Paramount wanted a summer release from Jerry, and he didn't have it, but he was booked at the Fontainebleau at that time in Miami, performing. What happened?
in the 3 weeks that he was at the Fontainebleau, he shot The Bellboy. That was his first film as a director. He spent 2 months writing the script. He conferred with his good friend Stan Laurel to help him with the outline of his first script. He then brought the film crew from Paramount, went to the Fontainebleau, shot the film in 27 days. I remember being on the set. It was bedlam, but it was so much fun. And he performed every night in the show.
Well, you had a shot list here that you have actually a photograph of. I was stunned. 20 setups today, 11 setups. Who does that? 20 setups. A setup is an entirely different lighting scheme, a scene. 20 a day? How did he pull this off?
He's a crazy person.
That helped, right? Tell me about the influence of Stan Laurel. You mentioned him a moment ago. You even refer to him as Uncle Stan in here.
Yes, he became a dear friend of my dad's in the late 1950s and was there to guide him along in his creative process. And I remember him as a wonderful man who we knew as Uncle Stan.
34 successful films in a row for Paramount, which I think is a record.
I think so.
I mean, that's an incredible, to have hit after hit like that, really, from the 50s into the 60s is simply remarkable. And he was churning out multiple films a year, many of his own design. Does it irritate you that we don't hear more about the legacy of Jerry Lewis as a comic innovator, the man who created Video Assist and these brilliant sight gags?
Yeah, it's a little frustrating, but there are constantly new generations that are discovering his work. We've worked closely with Paramount for years on getting the films out there, and they're on almost all the digital platforms now. And Paramount's come around in quite a few different ways in the last few years, and they're much more available now than they were digitally.
Now, this book, we should tell people what this is. Yes, it is kind of Jerry's philosophy on, quote, being a person, but it's also very personal, warm, and I would say newsy remembrances of your dad. You really had a front row seat, not only through your childhood, but you toured with him. You were his road manager, his stage manager, which I'll get to in a minute. But give me a sense, what struck me most as I reread the book, there's a chapter on prayer. There's a chapter on the love of God. Tell me about how your mother's faith, Patty's faith, shaped not only your whole family, but your father, who was Jewish, his faith.
Very much so. My mom's faith was his guiding light because she was his rock. No matter where he went, in what direction, she was the rock he always came back to. And my mom said he put the first crucifix up in our house before I was born. She said, I never hung one because I thought maybe he wouldn't like it. She says, he put one up for me. And so his prayer was very important to him. He talks about it in many documents that I have, and I remember him throughout my life talking about how important it was to pray.
We have images here of Dean Martin and your dad. Obviously, the partnership that defined both of their careers in many ways, certainly started it. Give me a sense of, in the book, you suggest that Dean was the man Jerry always wanted to be. Why?
Because Dean had so much stage presence and was so suave and never nervous.
Laid back. I mean, he almost was careless at times. I mean,
completely. That's the way it appeared. But my dad would be in the dressing room an hour and a half before performance with butterflies in his stomach, just nervous because he's got to go on stage. Dean would come down from the suite, check his hair in a mirror, and walk on stage. He didn't need to worry about it. So my dad was in awe of that.
But that yin and yang is what made the act. I mean, as you watch it, when you watch them at the Copacabana, that black and white footage, or you watch one of the movies, it's the coolness of Dean offset by the manic madness of Jerry that makes it all crackle. I mean, it makes it work.
Absolutely.
But it is interesting, and I want to get back to that relationship in a minute, but I asked your dad, as you remember, why he undertook helming the MDA telethon. And we should tell people, you know this more than anybody, he not only gave 60 years of his life to this cause, it was his everyday obsession. He was writing letters, he was doing personal appearances, he was raising money long before the telethon actually started, those crazed 3 days of production. Here's what the exchange I had with Jerry Lewis. Watch this. Muscular Dystrophy Association. You and Dean did really one of the first telethons at Carnegie Hall.
Right.
Live in New York. And then years later, you take this on, this incredible broadcast. 45 years, you raised $2.6 billion.
61 years,
Toto,
$2,500,000.
why did you do it for so long, Jerry?
Because I kept getting the money.
What's the full story here, Chris? He met a family very early on.
He met a family in 1949. I was able to trace it back through my mom's diaries and his performance record diaries of where he was when at the Copacabana, May 8th of 1949, when his cousin, Louis Katz, was involved in the 24th annual fundraiser for the Jewish Sanitarium Hospital for Children with Chronic Diseases. And my dad went to meet him at the Waldorf that day before performances and met this family who had lost 2 children to muscular dystrophy and were waiting for the third to die.
And that was the inspiration for this lifelong support of MDA.
My mom told me that he met a family and they touched him so deeply that he came home in tears and said, we have to help them. And that's what launched it.
The amazing, and we'll never see. I mean, he said it during when I interviewed him. You were there. No one will ever top his record. And the what happened there was not only did you have a performer who was so moved by the cause, but he was able to bring out the biggest stars in music, comedy, Hollywood, every discipline to come and do this beautiful love-a-thon for the whole country. There's no one who could summon and do that today. There just isn't that magnitude of star.
No. And there were 213 television stations carrying the telethon. That's why he called it the Love Network.
Amazing.
Because we were touching so many people in so many places.
You were your dad's road manager, lighting manager, prop manager from 87 to 89. When he was performing at Bally's with his friend Sammy Davis Jr., I was privileged to have been there one of those nights, and they were incredible. I mean, they were both incredible. Tell me how that performance and that time that they were at Bally's actually was the rekindling of the relationship between your dad and Dean Martin, which is something I'd never heard before.
Yes, they performed 12 times at Bally's between that approximately 2-year period of time. And the stage manager told me, he said, yeah, that's the mirror that Dean checks his hair in when he comes downstairs from the suite before he walks on stage. And so I was on the stage with my dad one night checking the props on the piano, and I pointed it out to him. I said, that's the mirror Dean checks his hair in. And he comes in like a week after we leave. If you wrote a note on it with a Sharpie, he'd see it. And he goes, that's a good idea. And so he wrote a note on it that says, hi, Paul, which is what he always called Dean, love JL. And when he came back at the next engagement, there was no answer. And so he wrote underneath it, ditto, love JL. And the next time it said, the name's Dino, not Ditto, schmuck, love partner. So that's how the rekindling started. And every time they would alternate performing at Bally's, they would write a note to each other on the mirrors, and there ended up being like 8 or 9 mirrors in that little room.
Do you have the mirrors?
I don't, but but the stage manager told me that before he left Bally's, before they changed the stage, he took them. So I'm hoping, his name was Pat. I don't remember his last name, but I'm hoping Pat still
You got to get those mirrors. Those are some precious mirrors.
Yeah.
I'm going to share this with the audience. When I asked Jerry Lewis what his legacy would be, this is what he told me. Watch. What is the legacy of Jerry Lewis?
The legacy?
The legacy of Jerry Lewis.
My son. That's the greatest legacy that I've left this world. That son.
Chris Lewis, how will you continue to extend and honor the legacy of your dad, Joseph Levitch?
Well, it's quite an honor, and I'm enjoying doing it by what we're doing with the book, sharing the true stories about my dad and his love of humanity and his love of God and how prayer was such an important part of his life. And we're doing those things in a number of ways, and there's some projects we're working on, documentaries and things like that you're going to be seeing a lot more.
Good. We need to see more of Jerry. We need his laughter and his love. And he so touched my life and our viewers in an incredible way. And it was such a gift to know him. And I thank you for bringing us together and making that happen. It was one of my favorite interviews, I have to tell you. And that's with popes and presidents, and it's right up there.
That's great.
So God bless you. Thank you. Chris Lewis, thank you for being here. Jerry Lewis, On Being a Person by his son, Chris Lewis, is available at bookstores everywhere and online, but go to jerrylewis2024.com. jerrylewis2024.com. You can order the book directly there. And for more information on the great work Chris does at the American Wheelchair Mission, visit amwheelchair.org. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Ron.
That is all the time we have for now. Be sure to catch us next week. Until then, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. Have a blessed, reflective Memorial Day weekend as we honor the brave men and women who gave their lives serving in our nation's armed forces. We owe our freedoms to them and their sacrifices. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, thank you for watching. I'm Raymond Arroyo. Bye now.